Good evening and welcome to The Strand. I'm Christina Foxley, Director of Events, and I'm pleased to welcome Rick Meyerowitz and Danny Abelson here tonight to discuss Drunk, Stoned, Brilliant, Dead, the writers and artists who made the National Lampoon insanely great. A tribute to the most influential American humor publication of all time, Drunk, Stoned, Brilliant, Dead is the definitive book on the National Lampoon, a greatest hits collection of the smart, over-the-top humor that made it such a pioneering publication. A prolific contributor to the magazine for 20 years and creator of the iconic Animal House poster, author Rick Meyerowitz also created the magazine's trademark visual, the Mona Gorilla, which has been called one of the enduring icons of American humor.
Me.
Shortly after 9/11, he and Myra Kalming created the New York stand cover of The New Yorker, the best-selling cover in that magazine's history. Danny Abelson, a longtime writer and editor for the Lampoon who started in 1976. For the past 30 years, Danny has been president of the Abelson Company, a communications agency that works mostly with nonprofits in the United States and Europe. Following tonight's presentation, Rick and Danny would be happy to take your questions. I'll be walking around with this microphone, so please wait for it before you speak. And then Rick will sign copies of his book for you, which you can purchase downstairs on your way out of the store. Please join me in welcoming Danny Abelson and Rick Meyerowitz to the Strand.
Thank you. I thought is this on? You can hear? I thought we'd never fill all these chairs. And yet here you are. And most of you are my family. So here's this book. Here's this beautiful title. This is something you should know. Actual size. This is not actual size. I had waited for 35 years for somebody to write the so-called definitive book about the National Lampoon, and it didn't seem to be happening. So under advice from an editor that I knew at Abrams, I undertook this job, and it was a job. It took 3 years to do this, but it allowed me to reconnect with all these amazing people. Those I'd been in touch with many of them, but some of them I'd lost touch with. Some of them live in California, some of them live in Canada, and most of them live around here. And I was able to find them all again and bring them together to kind of reconstitute this community of the National Lampoon. And the Lampoon was, let's see, I don't know what's coming next. Oh yes, the motto of the Lampoon. Making people laugh is the lowest form of humor. And this was said by Michael O'Donoghue, one of the great editors. You knew Michael, didn't you?
Very slightly.
Danny? Very slightly,
yeah.
Which is the only way you could probably know Michael. And Michael was very sharp, and his views on the world and the rest of the human race were also very sharp. And should I back up? Can you see? And this became the motto of the National Lampoon. And the idea was that it wasn't going to be sweet and funny. It wasn't going to be your old Mad magazine anymore. So that's speaking of iconic. And I guess with all these lights on the screen, it changes the color. Is there any way we can turn off the floods that are on the screen? And there she is now. Stan. That's better, don't you think? Apparently they spent 3 hours shooting this poor dog, and I mean with a camera. And they couldn't get him to look at the camera until finally he went at the gun, until one picture at the end of the shoot. They said, let's do one more, and the dog went like this. And it was the perfect picture. And the next issue, they printed an editorial that said, not enough of you bought that last issue. And so, it's your fault. Yeah. So, more outrageous stuff from the Lampoon. Hitler was apparently as big a target for humor as he is now. This image was after the My Lai massacre. The combination of Alfred E. Newman and Lieutenant William Calley, how he got to be a lieutenant is beyond me, was pretty amazing. And it was done by Frank Kelly Freas, who is the great cover artist of Mad magazine. They hired him to do this, and he did it with some joy in his heart because he knew how painful this was. It's the bummer issue. You see that up on top? It's a great theme, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, Ralph Nader.
Yeah, Ralph Nader. Yeah, Ralph Nader, the bummer issue. The justice issue. These images are here just to show you that the incredible graphic quality of the magazine, what they put on the covers, what they put inside, was really second to none. And I don't know what none is, but this was second to it. It was a powerful visual force in the magazine field in the 1970s. And just the 1970s. I showed this in China. Dan, I showed this in China a couple of years ago. I spoke to a college in Beijing, and this was the only thing that disturbed the students there. When they saw their hero, Che, getting hit with a pie, they went like that because it's just not done. We weren't allowed to, I wasn't allowed to show images of Chinese leaders at all, even if it was a kind image. I wasn't allowed to show it unless it was approved. And they wouldn't approve any images of Chinese leaders. I could show Nixon with a knife in his head. That was fine with them. But I couldn't show an image of anything like this. So I showed this. And I didn't get thrown out of the country. And the teacher who invited me to China to show pictures to his kids didn't get sent to a labor camp. And somehow things are loosening up there in a way in some areas and not in others. This was from that great photograph during the Revolution. And Paul Davis made this terrific painting, which appeared on the cover of Evergreen Review. And then Michael Gross, the art director of the Lampoon, made this painting. And I kind of wish he'd done a better job, but it's really effective. Notice he's missing fingers. It's Michael O'Donoghue took a normal baby book and he filled it with baby's firsts, and baby's first wound, baby's first toy, which was a piece of shrapnel, baby's first this, there's a bandage taped in there, baby's first bandage. It was a horror show, and it was also breathtaking in its satire. Lampoon wasn't afraid, at least in those days, of losing advertisers, and they lost advertisers.
God knows.
God knows, right. They lost this advertiser. You know, it was probably true. And Volkswagen sued the National Lampoon for $11 million. And what they said was not, you put our car in this ad, or our car doesn't float, because it did float. What they said was, you used our logo without changing it and without our permission. And they sued for $11 million, and the suit was settled out of court. The Lampoon had to razor this out of any future issues that they published. And of course, they didn't publish any future issues with that in it. So it was something that never really affected the distribution of this image. I was really happy to reprint it in this book. At least it hasn't been, because of what they had, what the lawsuit said, it had never been reprinted. From a story by Doug Kenny, lovely story called First Blowjob.
One of the series, right?
One of a series of stories. The story was a horror show. And I thought about printing it in this book, and I was so repelled by it that I just couldn't bear the thought that it would be in a book that had my name on it. But the illustration was fabulous.
Yeah. And you mentioned Michael Gross, that Michael and Peter and the art directors, the thing I loved about the Lampoon when I joined it was the amazing art direction and attention to detail. need this to show to use this. The thing I loved about it was that the art directors not only got really seriously wonderful illustrators to connect with people who really knew how to write funny, which was fairly unusual. It wasn't Mad Magazine, it was grown-ups. But you got Sam Gross and Stan and Rick and some amazing people, but they would go out and commission a cover like this and basically find somebody like Kelly Freas who did the real thing. That was the first thing you did, was you went to whoever did covers for Red Book or 17 or whatever had this kind of sentimental, oversaturated style and say, here's what we want. I don't think all of them knew what the ultimate purpose was, but they got parody that was so close to the real thing that it was thrilling.
Right. Some of the artists would say, you're giving me a chance to do something I never am allowed to do. And they just went. They did it with joy in their heart, because there's a kind of feeling when you're painting pictures sometimes that you're being wicked. You're doing something that you're not supposed to be doing. And there was that sense that a lot of the artists, particularly the artists who were doing straight-on comic books, to do a comic book parody made them laugh and
it was thrilling.
Happy. Yeah, it was thrilling for them. It's a nice cover.
Further
I just think
cementing the magazine's reputation for sexism, I might add.
Yes, right. It cemented the magazines, right, and that's not cemented.
It's well earned, yeah.
A story by Ted Mann from a comic book called A Few Bold Lads. There's a bit of a comment on what was going on in Ireland in those days. I think this is very funny. I don't hear any laughter out there. Is everybody just disgusted by this? It's very, and it's. I don't recall who drew this, but I mean the pleasure of throwing a Molotov cocktail. What do they call them in Ireland? Molotov
Good
cocktail.
question,
Yeah. Into a baby carriage. There you go. A famous Nixon cover, the only fold-out cover. And that's Kissinger on his nose. Jiminy Cricket. It's the only fold-out Lampoon cover ever. I think because Matty Simmons, the owner of the magazine, never wanted to spend the money again after what he found out when he found out what this cost. It's a cover by Bob Grossman. Look at those teeth. They're like chiclets. Yeah,
Brilliant.
perfect. I do love that. There's Bob's signature, a little thing down there. Look. This issue is brought to you by the Republican Party, a leisure service of ITT. What's ITT?
Yeah.
What's the Republican Party? Jerry Ford, speaking of Republicans. Now, weren't we lucky at the National Lampoon? For 20 years, the magazine published, and for 16 of those years, there were Republican presidents. We had Nixon, God's gift to caricaturists. You know, I can draw Nixon in my sleep. Yeah. Actually, if you just put a pencil in my hand while I'm asleep, I'd just probably...
This, on the other hand, is a great piece of art, I think.
This is by the great illustrator Don Ivan Punchatz, who passed away last year. He was absolutely terrific. He did the famous split beaver painting in the Lampoon, which it still horrifies people. You can see it in this book if you'd like to be horrified later. The Sistine Chapel floor. It was Michael O'Donoghue's idea that rather than do the ceiling, they'd show the floor. And it was a fold-out poster. Actually, it didn't fold out. It was just a two-page spread.
I think it upset a lot of people, too, oddly enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Subscriptions were canceled in dioceses all across the country.
Mystifyingly.
This was done by the artist Charlie White. And I'll tell you, if you've been to the Sistine Chapel, the mark of a successful visit to the Sistine Chapel is getting there early enough in the morning to see the floor, which is, because otherwise it fills with people and you're standing like this and you can't see anything. The floor is incredible. It's even better than this.
Yeah.
You must
this
go.
This is good.
The Mona Lisa. There was always an art theme running through the magazine. And so, of course, everybody knows the Mona Lisa, painted by Leonardo. And this is our version of it, the Mona Gorilla, one of the enduring icons of American humor. The Wall Street Journal called it the best magazine illustration of the 1970s.
Huh.
I decided I could live with that.
Yeah. I don't disagree.
I don't disagree. And by the way, look at this. The difference? A banana.
Yeah.